If you ask someone from the global north, they can always give you the time, but they can never give you any time. I just want to thank our timekeeper, because I think it is our timekeeper who is reminding us of the really pressing message here, which is that we are running out of time. That's particularly important now, because now we are doing our interventions, and our provocative interventions are 7 minutes long. The first speaker who is going to intervene provocatively for us now is Bonita Deop, who is the founder and president of Femmes Africa Solidarité out of Senegal, and also was voted by Time magazine in 2011 as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. When she has spoken to us, we will not be able to hear directly from Jin Gaman, who is from China and is responsible for the development, administration, design, and management of the Global Environmental Institute's programs. She's unable to be with us today, sadly, so Mari Asai will read her provocative intervention in her place. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. And let me, first of all, just thank the organizers for inviting me, coming for all of Africa and being with you today. You know, today is 21st of September, UN International Day for Peace. This is today. So peace be with us. Fantastic day. Before I start talking about what can be done in the future as challenges for all of us, let me first of all share with you a small personal story. When I was a young girl, and I think that it was said by my friends here, who is not coming from a village. I'm coming from a village. When I was young, teenage, going to school, I remember the village where I come from, which is Diop in Senegal. It was very green. You know, I even could see crocodiles when I was going to school. Animals, it was green. Something happened to us, and it became a desert. So when you look into the Sahara desert, this become dry. Nothing growing there. And people migrate. Some of the problems, of course, have been said by some of you to say, maybe we had a big company that was transforming our crops to something and bring us something that we call the chemical warfare. It became dead zone. You know it. This is where I come from. So the women are staying in my village, and they are the one building it to make it alive and fertile and making sure that the young people stay at home. That's my background. Let me now tell you my small experience also as the founder of Femmes Africa Solidarité. It's an African, not small, but I can call it as an African women peace movement. What we try to do is to make sure that we go in solidarity in response to the women that are in conflict, the women that need a lot of support. That's where I decided to create Femmes Africa Solidarité, which now has become one of the biggest platforms in Africa. But also we have created something we call a Gender is My Agenda campaign network. It's a bigger network that talk about not just women in conflict, but gender issues in general. So you can see one of my trip, I was in Congo, and I hear my sister coming from Congo talk to you today. In November, I was in East Congo, where the troops were coming in, the rebels, and I was there in solidarity with the women. You know, I was in one of the camps, and the women didn't have food to eat. And she said that Congo is the richest in terms of the forest, in terms of water. But where I was, there was a lot of women that have been 60,000 people displaced, majority of women, no food to eat. Could you imagine? And Congo is the richest. You go to the next place, what you will find, and those women are smallholders farmers. They were the ones that are, you know, taking care of their communities. But now they don't have nowhere to even grow the crops, so they were dying with famine. So I visited the next place, the village, where you find that there were corporations that were exploiting the resources of Congo. So the scenario that we saw is that the vulnerable, the women that are vulnerable, who contribute the least to that situation, are the now getting the problems. In this crisis, I think that we need to look at how we can come together to form a global women's movement. We can do it, but we still have challenges. We have challenges because we are fragmented. We need to know that. But how do we have opportunity as well, because our issues are interlinked. When I look at in the African context, what we have created is to make sure that the peace movement, the education movement, the health movement, you name them, come together. And this is what I see happening here. I'm asking if we came together to form this one movement for our Mother Earth. Can we do it? I just see the connection, the dots, because when I look at the peace movement, we have 3 pillars on women, peace, and security, which is the protection, the prevention, the participation of women. When you look at these issues, we are very much on fighting for those, not just the rights, but also our participation. You know, this world is 7.2 billion, and we women, we are 3.6 billion. We can do it if we are together. We can save our planet. We need to hold strong the legacy, for example, of Wangari Maathai and the other sisters that have been here. Let's say that every year we plant 3.6 billion trees every year. We can do it to replenish our planet. We have, each one of us, responsibility. I have it, you know, for the consumption, for example. Can we say that this is how we're going to control our water? It will be our own responsibility. But we have collective responsibility as a global movement to hold our governments accountable, as well as our corporation. We can have a movement of voices, the voice of the conscience. We show our faces, not only to ourselves, but to the global, to the UN, to the Security Council, to the General Assembly. Out of here, let's say that the summit is going, and I see here Ted Turner and others can help to connect, to go there and say this is our collective voices. I really think that we women, and here in the International Women, Earth and Climate Summit, we should be the vehicle, the faces, the driving force of the solution that we are waiting for, the world we want. I thank you.
Hi, my name is Mari Asai, and then I'm reading a statement from Jin Gaman. Jin Gaman. From China, sorry. Right. I am Jin Gaman from China, founder and executive director of the Global Environmental Institute, GEI. GEI is a Chinese local NGO that aims at designing and implementing market-based models for solving environmental problems in order to achieve development that is economically, ecologically, and socially sustainable. I'm very glad to have the opportunity today to talk to all of you and to share with you the efforts that Chinese NGOs are making and challenges that we are facing in terms of climate change. In the past few years, UNFCCC has been international stage for global climate negotiations. The Chinese government proposed at the COP conference in Durban that China aims to reduce carbon intensity per GDP unit by 40 to 45% by 2020 and assigned these targets to each province. GEI, under the framework of UNFCCC and China's National Climate Action Plan, has facilitated unofficial climate dialogues between China and US high-level officials and think tanks. These dialogues have successfully enhanced mutual understanding, trust, and cooperation between the two biggest carbon emitters and promoted that the two countries to take the interest of the whole world and other developing countries into consideration during the international negotiations and to take more responsibilities. Since 2007, GEI has worked on the improvement of industrial energy efficiency, hoping to explore a market-based solution to promote energy-saving technologies. We managed to complete 3 waste heat power generation projects in China with funding from CDM. In 2009, GEI, in cooperation with the US-based Center for Climate Strategies, has developed a China's version of methodologies and micro and macroeconomic models that many state-level governments are using for their climate action plan. In the next years, we will work with China's provincial government officials to help them create their own low-carbon development plans by using this toolkit. In the meantime, GEI is also concerned about the development and promotion of rural renewable energy technologies. We have pilot projects in China's rural areas on biomass cook stoves and biogas digesters to reduce the utilization of fossil fuels. Undoubtedly, there are lots of challenges ahead of us. The last couple of years, we have witnessed an increasing occurrence of extreme weather events in China. How can we help people, especially women and those in rural areas, ethnic minorities, and impoverished areas, to enhance their capacity to adapt to climate change? China has become the second largest economy in the world in the recent years, and therefore, how can we integrate some new contents into common but differentiated responsibilities? As a Chinese NGO, how can GEI advocate to the Chinese government to take more important role in global climate change issues and to provide more financial and technological assistances to developing countries using multilateral platforms? We bear the burdens and responsibilities, and we will continue our endeavor to fight climate change globally. Thank you very much.
Yeah, will you? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sephora Berman. I'm from Canada, and I have the incredible honor of both speaking on and moderating this panel, Our Bodies on the Front Lines, Fossil Fuel Resistance Campaigns. Today, you're going to hear from some of my heroes, women that I've worked with and admired for a very long time. Atossa Soltani, many of you know, is the founder of Amazon Watch. She's been leading international campaigns on the protection of tropical rainforests for over 20 years. May Bove is the executive director and co-founder of 350.org, helping to coordinate thousands of grassroots protests on climate change around the world. And Melinda Lubicon-Massimo from Northern Alberta, she's Lubicon Cree, and also a campaigner, a tar sands campaigner for Greenpeace. So please join me in welcoming our panel.
I guess I'll start. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Osprey and Sally, for bringing us all together. The Amazon is actually named after the myth of the woman warrior. So I think it's appropriate that we're convoking the spirit and bringing the people of the Amazon here to be with us. So I have a few slides just to run through, mostly just maps for to help us locate ourselves. The Amazon is the world's largest tropical rainforest, as you've heard, the lungs of the planet. 1/3 of all species on Earth are found there. Some 400 cultures make it their home. This is the longest river and really the 1/5 of the world's biodiversity. So in this heart of the Amazon, we have a lot of connection to the climate. We see that deforestation now, in tropical deforestation now generates more, from the Amazon generates more carbon than US automobiles. We know that a 2 degrees Celsius increase in the global temperatures would really condemn 42% of all plant species of the Amazon to extinction. We are seeing a savannaization, as sort of a drought conditions that are causing feedback loop that basically mean the dried forest can no longer sustain the, actually just hold the maps for a sec, can no longer sustain the hydrological cycle that drives weather systems and rainfall around the planet. The Amazon is the rain machine of the planet. And so what we're seeing is really one of the main things that's happening is the majority of deforestation happens within 40 miles of a road. So we know one of the strategies for protecting the Amazon is to keep it roadless. When you look at the fact that much of the deforestation that's happened in the Amazon, including in protected areas, are areas that are void of indigenous peoples, you realize that indigenous peoples whose lands encompass 25% of the Amazon basin are the key to its future survival. They have been maintaining these areas basically forested for a millennia. This is a photograph of the Xingu, where Maya Lu comes from, where you heard her speak earlier. The Xingu is a mosaic. The Xingu River has a mosaic of protected areas and indigenous lands. It's really an indigenous state with over 18 nationalities, 1,000 kilometers of river. And what you see deforestation all along the roads, and you see the Xingu remaining. The red is deforestation, and you see the Xingu as all of the rest of that area that's still solid. The indigenous peoples are the defense system supporting these areas. So, and they're putting their bodies on the line. They're taking really huge steps. Their families come. A lot of times, we spent last summer on the blockades, and this year so far, Maida has been on the blockades in the Xingu. There's been over 9 blockades over the last year. These people are come with their grandmother and grandfather and the children and the women, and they set up encampments. They confront security forces, incredibly hardship at an incredibly hardship conditions. So solutions. Well, before I get to solutions, I just want to say also the problem. The next slide. You know, I see really dirty energy versus positive energy. This is the two wings of the bird, with negative energy and the positive energy. We really do need to look at a complete shift in the way we generate energy. Right now, what you see is in the western Amazon. This is a map of the western Amazon, including current blocks and future oil blocks. Where the Andes meets the Amazon is the most biodiverse places on Earth. We're talking about the countries of Ecuador and Peru, Bolivia, Colombia. And the yellow regions represent the new oil frontier. Now, this isn't a lot of oil when you think about the global picture of oil. This is marginal oil. I would say it's the highest priced oil because it comes from the headwaters of the Amazon. Just 1 hectare of the Amazon has more tree species than all of North America. We're talking about the most biodiverse place on Earth, and really also where the most isolated and uncontacted and culturally traditional indigenous peoples live off the land. So if there was ever to say, we can't afford extreme oil, our climate can't even afford to burn half of the oil we already have, half of the oil reserves we already have found, why are we spending billions destroying the headwaters of the rainforest to get more oil? So we think that really oil exploration in these regions must stop. And when you look at the next map, you see some of the areas of, can I have the next slide, please? So, and this is the border region. This is an area you'll hear from Patricia tomorrow. These are areas where in Ecuador, the government is in the process of auctioning 8 million acres of pristine rainforest to the oil companies between now and November. It's an urgent battleground for resistance. Indigenous peoples, including the community of Sarayaku, have been keeping oil companies out of this region for over a decade. So you see northern Ecuador, and then southern Ecuador, and then in northern Peru, you see all of the proposed new oil projects that are planned in the next year, some 29 blocks covering 16 million acres. Again, I would say something like 60 to 80% of the areas you see are indigenous titled territories or claimed lands of indigenous peoples. So this is a huge battleground between the expansion of oil our climate can't afford and indigenous peoples who are putting their bodies on the line to say no. The next slide, I just want to say dams. This is a map of proposed dams for the Brazilian Amazon over the next 20 years. This is actually from the electricity plan, and we're really seeing Belo Monte as a critical battleground for this fight. And I'll just basically say that the Xingu, is right there in the middle of this battleground. Just to wrap up, I'll see a few more slides. What we're seeing, can you keep going with the slides? We're seeing basically the communities coming together, and women play a huge role in this because the prior consultation is a key to allowing these projects to go forward. And if only men are at the table, there is really no voice for indigenous women, and they are going to be the ones that are most likely going to be opposed to these projects, recognizing the future survival of the children and how those relate to their own future survival. So in terms of what strategies, I would say supporting indigenous peoples as the forest guardians, creating a network, a global network of forest guardians, picking those critical battlegrounds for everyone to rally, like the Belo Monte Dam, because what happens there will affect hundreds of other communities, many other rivers across the region, empowering women to be at the table, have their voices heard, and land rights. We know land rights has been the strategy for decades. We don't need to invent new false solutions like REDD. We can just go back to solutions that give indigenous peoples the right to land and the right to free, prior, informed consent. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is May Boovy, and I got to take the train here from New York City this morning, so grateful for those of you who traveled from very far away to be here. But I'm especially glad to be here because today we're actually going to take part in an action that's happening all over the country today called Draw the Line. It's focused on the tar sands and the Keystone XL pipeline. And there's more than 230 events taking place in 47 states. And I've been looking at photos coming in on my way here on the train, and they're beautiful and they're all over the place. So we'll get to take part in that in just a moment. But it's also, as we heard earlier, the UN Day of Peace. So it feels like a particularly special day to be having this conversation. Before we take action, I want to say a couple of things. First, why I think this gathering is so important, and then second, what are some reasons to be hopeful about climate change? And first, being here among so many women and some men as well, I was thinking a little bit about when we started 350.org in 2008, and I was one of a group of 6, which included one other woman and then all other men. And since 2008, we've expanded our work. We're working in many places, and one of the most exciting things about the work has been to see so many new young women leaders step up and be part of this team. So I felt really pleased reflecting on that in preparation for this summit, and to be among so many leaders who I look up to. So what are these reasons for hope? I picked out 4, and you may have others in your own mind, but first I would say the frontline struggles that connect our movement are a reason for hope. And Atosa just spoke about this, and as you were talking about Belamonte, it reminded me a lot of the fight on tar sands and stopping pipelines, and how these critical, specific fights that are drawing our movement together help us all feel connected. And seeing the map with all the dots and the stars and helping us all see ourselves connected, I think, is one of the most hopeful things we have going for us, because we know that we need to leave 80% of fossil fuels in the ground in order to avert the worst effects of climate change. And we know that the fossil fuel industry is on the march. So how is that going to stop? It's going to stop by these sparks of resistance all over the world. And the more we can feel connected, I think the more successful we will be. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why, at least here in the US, there's been so much emphasis on stopping Keystone XL. We get this question all the time. And I think for me, one of the most important reasons is symbols and tangible projects matter. And in such a big issue like climate change, being able to focus our energy and to think about how one fight is connected to others matters so much. And we know from what the tar sands industry says, they depend on Keystone XL. So if we stop it, they will be compromised in their efforts to expand the tar sands. Melina's going to tell us more about that later. Second reason is we have a clear enemy. And I spoke about this a little bit earlier, but we know who we're confronting. It's the fossil fuel industry. And I think I'm pretty new to this work. I'm only 29, but when I was getting involved as a college student, the environmental movement felt very different. It felt very focused on individual actions, lifestyle changes, and now this movement has really galvanized around, no, we have an enemy we need to confront. And I think that's a reason for hope, actually. And that's really what's underlied the work we've been doing around fossil fuel divestment. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this, we were inspired by the work around ending apartheid in South Africa, and how divesting from companies that did business with the South African government was part of the strategy to end the apartheid regime. So we thought, well, here's a way to demonstrate that there's a moral battleground between people and the interests of people and this industry. And so there's been a very inspiring divestment movement springing up all over the world. More than 350 campuses in the United States have active divestment campaigns. In Australia and Europe and many other parts of the world, these campaigns are popping up, and it's a way to show that if it's wrong to burn fossil fuels, it's wrong to profit from burning from fossil fuels, and our greatest education institutions shouldn't make their money that way. So that's another reason for hope. The third is that there are many leaders, and I want to call out 4 of them who aren't here, 4 young women leaders who are part of this divestment movement, and I'll say their names, and I'm sure you'll hear about them soon, but Chloe Maxman is working in Massachusetts to get her university to divest. Carly Vaughn is in Indiana, Kiara Klein and Costanza Mayo are in New York, and they're 4 of hundreds of young women who are joining this movement. And finally, we have science and public opinion on our side. And that's been true for a long time, but it's, in recent polls, 70% of Americans believe we have to act on climate change. That was not true even a year ago. So the tide is shifting. So to close, I want to say, one of the things I'm really interested in learning about, or one of the things I've learned about leadership is once you know what you need to do, it's a really remarkable moment. And sometimes the hardest thing is actually figuring out what you need to do. With climate change, we know what we need to do. And so that's, I think, my closing reason for hope is we know who we have to confront, we know we have to build a movement, so all that's left is to do it. Thank you.
Tansakia, Nia Melina Mio Wapen Labokam Asmo, Nia Nihia Kinaskum Tanawau. It's an honor and privilege to be here today. I feel very honored to be amongst such amazing women leaders and also elders that I have so much respect for, like Casey Camp, who we've been working with for many years in solidarity. I'm very much a visual person, so I brought pictures to show everybody. So it's very much going to be looking actually at the screen as opposed to me. So just a quick, who knows about the tar sands? Just to get an idea. Okay, well, there we go. So this is where I come from. I come from a small northern community. It's Cree, Nihiao is in our language what we call it. That's my grandmother on the bottom. So come from representing a lot of people in my family. That's my dad actually up in the top that grew up in the bush and my dad as an older person. So next slide, please. So I really like this quote because it really gives an understanding of how big this industrial project will be that we're facing in our homelands. There's nothing that compares with the destruction going on there. If there were a global prize for unsustainable development, the tar sands would be a clear winner. Not that there's a competition going on by any means, but that I just think that, world-renowned people, experts, are really seeing this as one of the, major issues, and that's why it's one of the biggest, the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada, and why Canada pulled out of the Kyoto Protocol. Next slide, please. So this is what it looks like, very viscous. It's, not fluid, so it takes a lot more energy, a lot more water, produces a lot more byproduct. Next slide. So it's equaling to why it's such a big area is 141,000 square kilometers, equal to that of destroying, England and Wales combined, or the state of Florida for American folks. Next slide. The mines that we're dealing with are bigger than entire cities. So there's about 6, 7 right now, be up to 9. And this is Imperial Oil, say for example, will be bigger than Washington, D.C. alone. So that's just a mine. And this is taken from the air. So these are some of the biggest dump trucks in the world. If you go to the next slide, and a lot of the issues for toxicity that we're dealing with is, and which relates to the water, is these huge tailing ponds. They're called ponds, but they're actually big toxic sludge lakes. They currently span 180 square kilometers just of toxic sludge that's sitting on the landscape. So every day, 1 million liters are leaching into the Athabasca watershed, which is, where our families drink from. I'm from the Peace region, but it connects to the Athabasca and it goes up into the Arctic basin, so that's where all the northern folks will be getting some of, these toxins, and these contain cyanide, mercury, lead, polyaromatic hydrocarbon, nymphatic acids, so there's a lot of issues that we're dealing with health-wise. So if you go, and there's also underground mining, I won't go too much into it, I don't have much time, but there's different types of mining underground, above and below. Next slide. And so this is like what they call the northern lungs of the earth. It's one of the northern remaining intact forests, the boreal forest, and it's being deforested for mining in the tar sands. And this will result in actually extinctions as well in the north, like the woodland caribou by 2040 within our lifetime will be extirpated from that region. Next slide. So health concerns for our families, respiratory illnesses, to the water, to the air. So a lot of our family members have cancers, a lot of poison air that we're breathing in. Next slide. So this is actually my family, our traditional territory. There was a massive oil spill, one of the biggest ones in Canada's history. 4.5 million liters went into our traditional lands. You go to the next slide, you can actually see a picture we took from the air. Those little white hazmat suits are actually people, so it was a huge area that it consumed. Next slide. And then a lot of the issues we're dealing with is, this is 15 months later when the company said it was completely reclaimed. which it wasn't, obviously, what we're pulling up from the earth. Next slide. A lot of the issues we're dealing with on the front lines is, you know, like this is my cousin's children having to breathe in the air, and the government and the company saying that this isn't happening, that, you know, that they're not breathing, that they're fine, you know, that there's no issue. Next slide. So what we're seeing in the north, what we're calling is cultural and environmental genocide, further encroachment into the territories, contamination, destruction of our territories, resulting in further loss of tradition, culture, language, the inability to exercise our quote-unquote constitutional rights in Canada. Next slide. And this is what the landscape's being replaced with, industrial landscapes, polluted air, contaminated waterways. So next slide. A lot of what we're seeing, though, is resistance on the ground, a groundswell. This year, we've had our 4th annual Healing Walk, which we had, you know, over 500 people from across Canada, America, and Europe, all these different places come and walk with us in solidarity. So we're definitely seeing more resistance on the ground locally. And then also, we are also doing campaigning nationally and internationally. I won't go into that right now, but because I have 1 minute. But this is actually just for folks to have, if you do want to learn more, this is a really good website called Oil Sands Reality Check. It just gives you kind of the overall, all the different climate, you know, human rights, economy, land and species, air and water issues. So that's always a good resource to go to. And also, if you want to learn more about the oil spill that happened, if you go to Oil on Lubicon Land, that it's a short photo essay that kind of describes kind of the issues that I've been talking about within about a 10-minute video sequence. So hi, thank you for listening.
It was bad planning because I forgot how affected I am every time you speak, Melina. It's a lot to take in 7 minutes, isn't it? But what I want to tell you about in closing is, I think, one of the most exciting movements that we've seen develop in the last decade. If you, from Nebraska to northern British Columbia, the Yankee Dene Alliance, to now in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia on the East Coast, where new pipelines are being proposed, from Washington, D.C., to Alberta, Lubicon, and Athabasca, Chippewa, and Beaver Lake Cree Territory, to Vancouver, and also to Brussels with the Fuel Quality Directive. We are seeing a diverse movement arise that is connected and networked and making international global connections about the issues while supporting Indigenous people and being focused on local impacts. I think it's what the climate movement has been looking for decades. This slide is from a new site that we just launched, tarsandsolutions.org. This is an international network of now, I think, over 50 organizations, including Indigenous groups, community groups, landowners, ranchers, and environmental groups who are working together to stop the expansion of one of the largest pools of carbon on the planet, in the tar sands. And we're doing that by supporting local efforts against these pipelines that are threatening people's water tables. So whether they realize they did it or not, what the oil industry has done by proposing now 6 pipelines as a spider web across North America is they have created who are worried about water, about climate change, about sovereignty, about land issues, joining together. It's just an example of the site. It's also a searchable warehouse database for every report any of those Indigenous groups or environmental groups have ever put out. If you want a map of the Keystone Pipeline or the Energy East Pipeline, it's a free searchable database. And every day we aggregate and amplify the work of the groups and send it back out. So it's not a new coalition creating a new brand that's creating new work for everybody. It's simply a space where we aggregate and amplify local work and connect it. I also, in my time, wanted to give you a little sense of what it's like right now in Canada and connect back to this conversation we had yesterday about democracy. This is my son, Quinn. When he was 8 years old, at dinner, he turned to me one night and said, "Mommy, why does the government think you're a terrorist?" Not exactly the conversation you want to have with your 8-year-old son, but he had heard on CBC radio that the government was trying to change the formal definition of domestic terrorism in Canada to include environmentalism. Not only have they done that, but in the last year, the Canadian government has eradicated 70 environmental laws. We no longer have fisheries habitat protection in the Fisheries Act. We don't have water protection in the Navigable Waters Act. And secret documents revealed through Freedom of Information show that they did this at the request of the oil industry. There are 1,000 streams that the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline would have to cross. So those laws were in their way. They also shut down the Atmospheric Research Station, one of the world's most important sources of climate data. They shut down the National Roundtable on Environment and Economy, because every year that body was giving them reports saying, yes, a low-carbon economy is possible and more profitable for Canada, and they shut it down. They've also been muzzling our scientists to the extent that the journal Nature last year published an editorial saying it's time for Canada to set its scientists free. Our scientists are no longer allowed to release reports to the public or to speak to media without a handler from the Prime Minister's office. And this is Canada. But I want to give you a sense. So this is a petrostate. This is what happens because oil corrodes. It corrodes our pipelines, it threatens our communities, but it also corrodes our democracy. And when fossil fuel companies have an undue influence on our governments and policies, then this is what we see. But we're fighting back, and we're fighting back in our communities. And in closing, I want to just bring some of those people here to you, since they couldn't be here today. Next slide, please. This is Ariel Deranger from the Athabasca Chippewan First Nation. She's a young mother of 2 and one of the most savvy campaigners I have ever met in my life. Ariel and the Athabasca Chippewan First Nations are suing the federal government. They're launching a constitutional lawsuit because these projects are being pushed onto their land and threatening their way of life. As well, of course, there's an incredible lawsuit going on by the Beaver Lake Cree. Next slide, please. This is Geraldine Thomas Fleur, who along with many others in her community in the far north of British Columbia has brought together disparate nations under the Yankee Dene Alliance banner. And they put up signs, and despite the fact that they have the highest suicide rates in the country and the highest unemployment rates in the country, and that Enbridge was offering them millions of dollars, together they have said no. They have said, we have a wall of opposition and no pipelines will cross our territory. Thank you. This is Jane Klebe of Bold, Nebraska, who you may be more familiar with, who has stood up not only against the fossil fuel industry, but organized in her community in Nebraska and built incredibly unlikely alliances with ranchers, with landowners. And they're saying no to the Keystone Pipeline and inspiring us all to oppose a pipeline that is all risk and no reward for the United States. And finally, I wanted to just leave you with what I hope is a gift. A little story from my grandmother, who I couldn't help but bring into this women's gathering. I got the title of my first book from my grandmother, who was 92 years old. And on her deathbed, she turned to me and she said, I know you feel like it's too big, and climate change and all the stuff you're working on, you're overwhelmed. But I want you to remember that the world will entirely change in your lifetime. That the world has changed in my lifetime. She said to me, when I was growing up, I didn't know anyone who'd ever been on a plane. I didn't know anyone who, there was no such thing as computers, let alone that Raspberry you're always holding, she said to me, talking about my BlackBerry. She said to me, the world can and will entirely change in your lifetime. It's just not linear. And so now when I do this work and listen to all of you, I'm imagining sitting with my sons one day and their grandchildren, and I'll be telling them about this crazy time that we clawed at the earth to get at the last of the oil. This crazy time that we logged some of the most important forests in the world to make catalogs and phone books. A crazy time when we used to fill our cars with gas, and they won't believe me, because the world will be such a different place. Thank you. So we have time for some questions and comments to our speakers, and we're going to leave 5 minutes at the end of this session so that May can organize us all into a line, those of you who would like to participate, to draw the line against Keystone, and we'll take a photo, and we'll be number 251 of the protests that happened today around the country. Yeah, over here. The woman in the white shirt.
Okay. Hello. I'm Fadwa Bro from Morocco, president founder of Moroccan Youth Climate Movement. Actually, my question goes to all the guest speakers here. I want just to spotlight one important point, which is how can you, as a women leader in terms of climate networks in your country, help the other women in the developing and underdeveloped countries to strengthen their movements and to take the lead in terms of advocacy, climate advocacy process? Thank you.
Atosa or May?
So the question is how we can link women and basically support people on the front lines. I think there are obviously many ways. In places where I work, in the communities in the Amazon, there really is a need to make the issues visible globally. These governments are very susceptible to external pressure and to international pressure, and even to pressure in the capital cities of their countries. So I think bringing women together at events like this and being able to monitor things like the protests in the Belamonte Dam monitored around the world through the internet does make a big difference. And we've had letter writing campaigns and petition drives, and those really make a difference. And I do think that there are these linkages buildings. I'm really inspired by the indigenous movement doing what they do at the UN. Every year, the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues brings indigenous people together from all over the world, and that's where they increase their linkages and serve as each other's resource. And lastly, I would just say, let's make an announcement that next September 21st and 22nd, exactly a year from now, is the United Nations Summit on Indigenous Peoples. It's a United Nations Conference on Indigenous Peoples. It's a UN conference that the General Assembly will be treating the issues of Indigenous rights. It's an important moment to build to over the next 12 months.
Mm-hmm. Should we take another question, or did you want to add anything? No. Please. And then the woman in the red, and then the woman in the black at the back. Thanks.
In terms of linkages, my question would be, do you feel that your movements are ready to include a strategy like carbon fees with 100% going back to the people in each country in order to add another mechanism to reduce the incentive to burn fossil fuels and to help you in divesting and blocking these untenable proposals?
I think we're seeing different trends in different places. I think one of the things that's been really inspiring about this tar sands movement is it's helped connect frontline struggles, infrastructure projects, and national policies. And so I think that linkage is very important. And in some places, a strategy around what you're describing will make sense. And in other places, it will be some sort of other national policy. But I think one of the things that's happened in the recent movements around tar sands and around fighting coal plants and coal expansion around the world is developing ways for someone who's resisting a coal export facility in Australia can also see how their fight is connected to who's in the Australian election and the plans for a carbon tax in Australia, and actually seeing those pieces together. So I think that's in some ways how this connects.
Did you want to? Sorry, just one sec. Atosa had one comment to make on that as well.
Just that, as we look at these mega diverse countries, there are 17 mega biodiverse countries in the world. According, Amazon has some of them, Central Africa, and also places in Southeast Asia. when you look at asking the governments of these countries to forego drilling their fossil fuels, what we're saying is keep your oil in the ground, keep your coal in the ground, don't develop. And there is a way where the government of Ecuador says, well, you guys caused all the problems so far. There's an equity issue. You owe us a debt. You are responsible for these emissions, and you're asking us to keep in the ground. Unfortunately, Ecuador had this visionary idea to keep the oil in the ground, and the international community just did not show up with enough support. And the government of Ecuador has since rescinded and is about to start drilling in the Yasuni National Park. But here is an issue that's ahead of its time. We're going to have to figure out how to support poor countries, or where resources are resource rich, but economically not well off, to be able to forego drilling these reserves, keep them in the ground for a problem we caused. And given the fact that half of Ecuador's oil comes to the United States, it just seems to me that we're going to have to address that one. And it's unfortunate we've lost this momentum on this Ecuador battle, but it is really a model that we need to address. And so, but other models like RED, I just want to say that reducing emissions for avoided deforestation and forest degradation has been the most divisive issue our movement's ever faced. It's been a huge waste of time, and really it's just gone commodifying of forest and carbon reserves. And really want to talk about living carbon, as Vandana says.
Hello, this is Carmen from Bolivia, from Reacción Climática. There is one thing I want to put on the table since I come from Bolivia. A few months ago, the government has signed to start fracking in Bolivia, because we are like the 5th country that has the reserves. And what has happened is that we don't know what's fracking, so they have sold it like a more friendly, more greener alternative to taking out the oil from the ground. So now we have a really strong challenge in that sense, in the sense that we also have to start fighting fracking, because for us, as part of the 350 global movement, we saw the Keystone, and we saw all the fracking problems like first world countries. We saw what was going on in Ireland, we saw what was going on in the United States, and all the manifestations, and we were supporting. And all of a sudden, we turn around and we see that fracking is going to start in our country. And it's going to be a really big deal, and probably I'm going to be advocating with most of you in order for that not to happen, because we as Bolivians are already the top per person, the most, we have the highest levels of emissions in CO2. Why? Because we have high rates of deforestation. So we have to, those are the challenges that we are facing in order to really achieve the good living we are proposing. But there is a lot of not understanding, and it is true, we here know what's fracking, we here understand those issues, but outside they don't know what is it. And third world countries, they don't know, they have never heard fracking. I know that we had to find translations, the correct translations for some of these words that we didn't have in Spanish 2 years ago. And I'm sure that's the problem in another languages also. And if you're talking in indigenous languages, it's worse. So we have to start talking these issues, taking out of these small environments and start spreading to people and start teaching them the basic stuff that they have to know, because their resources are the ones that are going to be jeopardized in the future, and we have to start working with the ground population in order for them to understand what it really means. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you. Anybody want to say it? No? Didn't think so. Actually, we have some questions from people online, but we have some time, so I will get to some of you over there. So, from Lori online, are boycotts a viable strategy? And if so, how can we find out and get involved in promoting boycotts of some of the specific issues you've addressed? Well, while they're thinking, I will say one thing, because we really addressed this issue, we really looked at this issue hard when I was, a couple of years ago, I was co-director of Greenpeace International's Climate and Energy Program, and after the Gulf spill, we had a lot of people from a lot of different offices saying, well, we should just be boycotting, clearly we should be boycotting BP. We spent a lot of time looking at that and trying to figure that out. At the time, my opinion, and why we didn't start a boycott, was that so which oil company is better? Which one is the one that you want to say buy from? And of course that's it's like when I was working on forest issues, we used to call it the waterbed effect. Great, they stopped buying from the temperate rainforests of British Columbia, but so then they started buying more mahogany from the Amazon. That's actually when Atosa and I met 20 years ago, when we joined up the temperate rainforest and the tropical rainforest campaigns, trying to figure out how to deal with that. Boycotts are hard to stop. They're hard to control. And so while they are a great tool in the right circumstance, I, for one, have thrown a lot of my weight behind the divestment work as an alternative, because I think we're past the point of talking about the practices of one company.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and really focusing on investment campaigns is where we're going. We do have to follow the money, and we're looking at whether it's the oil industry or the dam building industry. We have to see who's insuring them, which are the banks that are lending to them, who are the big shareholders of the companies that are behind them, and those are guiding our strategies a lot more.
I'll just say something really quick. I agree. I mean, I think a lot of what our campaigning has been is targeting the financing companies of tar sands, so like top 10 financiers, so going to the banks, going to the AGMs of Royal Bank of Canada, going to the AGMs of Royal Bank of Scotland, also going to AGMs like Shell, BP, Statoil, all of those companies, because there is over 20 companies, say, for instance, in the tar sands, so we know which one do you boycott. They're all pretty horrible. But I mean, there was that one attempt for tar sands was, the Levi company. It was like Forest Ethics made that one list. And so there's some companies that actually have come forward, like Lush, that refuses to buy kind of any tar sands specific derived fuel. So there is companies that are coming forward, but I mean, I agree, right. Sometimes it does very much, if it helps to get someone to feel like they're doing something, that might be a good way to do it, but I think it is going against like the financiers and actually companies.
This year, Sierra Club US and Forest Ethics will join up to launch a corporate campaign that is on green fleets. It's a fascinating campaign because it combines fossil fuel resistance with solutions. And they're challenging major corporations to stop buying from tar sands and start implementing demand reduction strategies. And they already have, I think, there's over 20 companies that have signed on, major companies, and they're launching a very public campaign right now against Pepsi and Coke for using tar sands fuel. We've actually been able to track tar sands throughout which refineries throughout the United States. Just going to take a question from this side of the room. You. Well, we'll take both of you. We'll take you first because you're standing up, and then the woman in the black and white dress.
Thank you. Sasha, I had a question to all of you, which is similar to this. In how far also can we know when we purchase any oil if there's a part of tar sands in that? Like with electricity, when can we know if there's nuclear in there? So I think the right to know where the energy comes from is very important. And I just wanted to highlight an example. I currently live in Germany. I'm from the Netherlands. And of course, there we have had a campaign to buy green electricity. And to have people swift to producers which do not use nuclear and so on. So I think that's a very important start. And what I found interesting, and Sabine will maybe say more about it later, is that currently the investments in renewables in Germany are almost all done by citizens, by people like us who say, we stop, we are no longer part of this system. So 40% of the investments are by citizens and citizens-run companies, 11% by farmers. And only 6% by the big companies, who in principle have all the means to do it. And I think that's very telling. But we need to change our laws to be able to really achieve this shift and to give the power to citizens-owned companies who are really working with only safe and renewable and green energy. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a great book that Inside Climate just put out called Clean Break. You can get it online, which is a case study of Germany and how they've done what they've done. We have 3 more minutes, so if it's okay, I might just get this last question in, and then we can see if you have any final comments. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I just loved and enjoyed the coming together of mind, hearts, and bellies of 4 such intelligent women. It's a total joy. And the question I have is about resilience of communities, because I feel that what you also spoke about the importance of having a global network of forest guardian communities, and a lot of this action is in a deep way based in communities looking after their lands. That's where I hear many of you also coming from, with the deep fire and roots that you have. And how can we look after the resilience of the communities that are on these front lines?
So just any final comments from those last couple of questions?
Maybe we could hear from our native speaker, and then I have some thoughts.
The question of resiliency is really difficult sometimes, because I feel like what we're still addressing in our communities is colonization. You know, I think a lot of people think in Canada colonization is over, or whatever. I mean, I don't think people in this room would think that, but there's neo-colonialism going on, and we're always dealing with this legacy of always, you know, continual encroachment on our land. And so it's like, I feel like it's always a struggle. I mean, the community I come from still has no running water. And so, you know, like the buildings are like decrepit, they're falling in. Like, it's not, we're still dealing with issues of lateral violence and all of the things that come with colonialism. And so I think a lot of it is hard sometimes, but I think there is definitely resiliency in the recognition that Indigenous knowledge is, you know, is a strong way forward, and that recognition that our peoples are, you know, have traditional ecological knowledge, have answers to a lot of the problems that we're facing currently. So I think that brings about a lot of resiliency out of like the shame that was really kind of brought into our communities to like kind of this unleashing and this, you know, this moving forward. So I think it's still like, I'm not gonna, you know, paint it pretty, because I mean, going back home, it's not. But there is resiliency in the sense that moving forward and trying to find solutions and being amongst people like that, but also, yeah, like really honoring who we are and where we come from, and using that to carry us forward really is where I find my resiliency.
I guess the only other thing I would add is just the process in the Amazon has been amazing. Obviously, you can't generalize, but there are still communities that are winning back their land. They're in the process of reclamation or recuperation of their territories. And sometimes that means working out long-term vision for their sustainable management of their land, and reforestation, recuperation, but also just finding a way to come together to articulate a vision for their future. And this has been a process I've been most inspired by. They call it the life plans. Coming together for a life plan, not a development plan, not an energy plan, not a conservation plan, not an education or health plan, but a life plan, which puts all of those other things about their future under the context is what is our vision for the future, the 7th generation, the fact that we want to speak our language, the fact that we want to have these forests and have these animals and be empowered to care for ourselves and for our children. And based on that, we want to, basically everything else comes under that. We have these values about our future and our vision for the future. So anything from development to healthcare to education to any of the other things come, you know, in a way to serve that vision as opposed to be the primary objective, which is how we are. So they have a lot to teach us about many communities coming together in articulating their long-term vision.
Thanks, Atosa. So we are all going to be here for the whole summit, so you can connect with us. And I'm going to turn everything over to May, who is going to organize us into something cool. And just also mention that in the center of each of your tables is a letter to President Obama that we will send on Monday from women at this summit who are opposing the Keystone Pipeline. So if you feel inclined, we hope you will sign that letter before you leave, and we'll collect them later this afternoon. May.
Thanks, everybody. So Okay, we can do this in 8 minutes. It will be a great challenge, and I'm confident we can do it. So this day of action I referred to is called Draw the Line, and people all over the country are forming lines in their communities, often in places that are threatened by climate change, often places that are near coal plants or oil refineries, places that are the sources. So we don't have that exactly. We can use our imaginations, but what we can do is still form a line of this incredible group of people who are here. So my suggestion, and my friend Supashni, longtime colleague from Fiji, is also going to help arrange people. But whoever is interested and able and wants to stand up, we can start the line over here and move it across here. And I think the best thing would be to join hands like this and hands up like this.
And where's the photographer? Which way
And
are you facing?
I'll be the photographer.
You're the photographer, and you're on the stage.
And I'll be up here. Oh, you can be the photographer.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this.
All right. Yeah. But I need to do one with my smartphone too.
You know, you guys, I think it's better to be facing this way. I'll stand in the chair.
Yeah, road. All right. That was fun. That was fun.
Hi. That was great. Oh, yeah. Sure. Oh, okay. Let's do it. I'll be here all day. Yeah.
May, this is fabulous.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Can you stay or do you got to run?
No, I don't. I can stay.
How long are you going to stay?
I'm going to leave at 6:30.
Okay, 6:30. Yeah, great.
Okay.
That's good because we want to pick your green and working groups. So
Oh, okay.
Sure that you're
Yeah.
That's good. She's here for the day.
Here for the day.
Excellent. This is going to be great.
I guess we can also spread out. Hello. Very nice to meet you, Catherine. Yes, very nice to meet you. That's your job. If you want to take your card and spread out, it's also fine. I just... You're seated next to me.
I'm Amy.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I'm just going to introduce on my the furthest on my right, and then come this side. Yeah, but you'll be the.
Iron it from afar for a long
you.
For you guys.
Okay.
Let's help you out.
Hello.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and start our next session. If everyone could seat themselves.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
If you can hear me, raise your hand. That seemed to work. If you can hear me, raise your hand. And please take a seat. If you can hear me, raise your hand. Oh, that worked. Great. Please take a seat, and we're going to begin this next amazing panel. Thank you.
Do I push this or? Oh yeah, this one. Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Paracha, and I'm extremely honored to have been invited to moderate this session on just transition for clean energy futures. I am the coordinator of an international network known as Energia, and we work in 22 countries, working mainly with civil society organizations on mainstreaming gender into energy programs and policies. We've been doing this for the past 17 years, and we do it from the standpoint that, first of all, energy is an essential right to services for meeting basic human needs for food, for fuel, water, health, education, and communication. But secondly, that energy is also a means for economic empowerment to make it possible for women, but also men in the sector, to develop enterprises that have a return investment in improving livelihoods in communities and at the national and at the global level. Energia also, in keeping with the theme that we have here, Energia also strongly believes that a sustainable approach to actions in the energy sector is a partnership approach. And in doing this, we are members of global alliances, for instance, the Global Gender and Climate Alliance, but also we're also members of the UN Sustainable Energy for All initiative. That was launched, Rashinda, I think it was in 2012 we had the year, but it was 2011. And this is an initiative that has set very ambitious goals and targets for ourselves, bringing different stakeholders. So civil society is one of the pillars, but we also believe that you have to be part of the problem if you're going to be part of the solution. So civil society, governments, and business have come together to try and see how we're going to achieve three ambitious goals. One is universal access to energy by 2030, to double the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency, and also to double the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix. This is quite unique that you have both the climate change and energy access agenda coming together in one initiative. I'm excited today because I know that we have partners and members like Energia on the panel that are going to speak coming from these different groups to how we are on the ground, but also at the policy level, what we are doing to actually try and achieve these objectives. So in doing this, I have an excellent panel of speakers here, both together with us here in the room, but we also have one online. I'm going to begin with our speaker furthest to my right. That's Rashinda van Leeuwen. And I believe I said it right because I have connections to the Netherlands. And Rashinda leads the UN Foundation's work on energy access and its engagement with the Sustainable Energy for All initiative. She has founded and leads the UNF's Energy Access Practitioners Network, which focuses on clean microgrid and off-grid approaches to providing services, particularly for remote and off-grid areas in the world, and in developing financing and policy solutions. I'm also pleased to introduce Catherine Lucy, who is the CEO of Solar Sisters, which has developed quite a unique approach in the sector. It's a women-centered network in Africa for distributing and selling solar lanterns and other technologies. I'm very excited to hear about how we're engaging with women entrepreneurs and with women's economic empowerment. I also have Amy Christensen, who is the founder and CEO of Christensen Global Strategies. And I'm looking forward to hearing how we have looked at sustainable and inclusive means of investments and working with industries and governments on developing sustainable energy solutions. Online, by Skype, Angelina Galeteva, who is the founder and chair of Renewable's 100 Policy Institutes and active in promoting increased energy efficiency and the use of renewable energy, is going to be joining us. So having said that, Rashinda, it's my pleasure to give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheila, and good afternoon, everybody. It's been fantastic to see the use of light pervading the conference so far, because one of the things I want to talk to you all about this afternoon is the issue of light. And you may see these little candles off to the side. We still have 1.2 billion people today who are depending on candles and kerosene for their lighting and for their other energy needs. And what Sheila mentioned around the Sustainable Energy for All initiative is where I'm focusing and doing a lot of work for the United Nations Foundation as a contribution to helping provide some of the solutions that we've identified that we need earlier during the day. One of the things that we see is that people are depending on candles and dry cell batteries and kerosene for lighting, and then also using biomass that unfortunately kills from the smoke that comes from the cooking more than 3 million women and children prematurely every single year, more than apparently the effects of malaria around the world. So we're really trying to address that in a very pragmatic way and look at how we can help the households and communities get access to the solutions that they need. So what we did in 2011 as part of our contribution to the Sustainable Energy for All initiative objectives that Sheila has mentioned is to set up a network of 1,500 today member organizations, some drawn from the private sector, some drawn from civil society, some drawn from the investment community, to look at how pragmatically we can actually help to shift those supply chains so that we can provide communities and households with the solutions that they really want to be able to use to help meet their lighting and their other energy needs. So I'm proud that Catherine here today is one of our member organizations as well, and it's terrific to have a really strong partnership here. What we're looking at is not only the needs, as Sheila had already mentioned, in terms of education, but we really see the interconnectedness in terms of an ecosystem of energy services that can help to provide better education for the children, being able to read in the evening and not have their eyes burning from smoke. For mothers, and I have several slides here that we can just loop, but for mothers actually being able to get their healthcare needs met. The World Health Organization has recently come out with a report that says in the 11 African countries they surveyed that from 23 to as much as 60% of the health clinics still have zero access to electricity. And what does that mean very pragmatically? It means some women die in childbirth. It means that even if there is a doctor or nurse there, that they may not be able to see to put the IV in to be able to provide the life-saving solutions. So I think we've heard a lot about solar vaccine refrigeration, but we also need to think about what are we doing in terms of our overall powering of health clinics. One of the other interesting, really good statistics that's come out from that World Health Organization report is that solar power is much more reliable than diesel generators for providing those energy services. So what we're really focusing on is how do we get those solutions into the hands of the households and the communities that need them today? How can we use small businesses, entrepreneurs, startups, others, using their power through the investment, through the private sector, through community voices, to help to change these supply chains and switch out to cleaner and safer and actually more affordable solutions. One of the things that you may not hear is that people spend up to 30% of their income on the little energy that they have, and we have these reliable solutions that you're going to be hearing about in just a minute from Catherine that can help to be providing a more secure, more resilient, more affordable, cleaner, safer, healthier future. So who wouldn't want that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Catherine? Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Usually when I speak to large groups, one of the things that is central to my talk and that I want to leave them with is the understanding that energy is a women's issue. But I think probably today I don't have to stress that. I think I'm preaching to the choir here. So I think we can jump right in and talk about what does that mean? What does it really mean in women's lives? How is energy affecting them, and how is lack of access to energy affect their lives? One of the things that I think is critical is understanding that every day when you wake up, the first thing you probably do in the morning is you flip a switch, turn on the light. The last thing you probably do at night is flip that switch and turn it off. All day long, we're checking our Blackberries, our iPods, our computers. We're hooked into the information age. It empowers us, it helps us be connected, and it gives us tremendous, tremendous power. What happens when you don't have that electricity, you don't have light, you don't have connectivity? It isolates you, and isolation is one of the most difficult things to overcome. And so the simple provision of light and energy is one of the most fundamental building blocks of development, of helping people lift themselves out of poverty. Energy poverty is itself both a cause and effect of poverty. And so trying to get at the solution for energy poverty is something that is, as Regina was saying, it's 1.6 billion people in the world who are affected by it. That's a quarter of the world's population that doesn't have access to light and electricity as we commonly have it. And what that means in their daily life is a girl comes home from school, and instead of studying, what she has to do is help her mother collect wood for dinner that night and go fetch the water because there's no water pump that brings it to their home. And so by the time she's finished with her chores, they've finished dinner, they've cleaned up, it's time for her now to do her studies. There's no light. So she might have a small kerosene lamp to study by. But I don't know if you've ever tried. These are not kerosene lamps like you would see at REI. This is not some beautiful high-tech or high-quality lamp. It looks something like a tuna fish can with a wick stuck in it. And so she lights that, and the smoke goes directly in her eyes. Her family's complaining that she's spending too much of that kerosene because it's expensive. And so she has only a few minutes to study before it just becomes not worth it. You turn the light out. She goes to school the next day, and she hasn't done all of her homework. She falls behind in class. She falls behind in school. She drops out. And then yet again, another girl goes into the cycle of poverty because she doesn't have the education. And really it comes down to these very simple interventions that are within our reach. Giving people light is a technology that is simple and straightforward, and it's possible. And so why don't we do it? Why is there this gap? Why is there still a quarter of the world's population without light? And so Solar Sister is the organization I work for, is focusing on what are the gaps. And the two gaps that we saw are, first is distribution. Because we have the technology, we have the ability to create solar and other clean energy solutions, but what's happening is it doesn't get out to the people who most need it. And so it's a last mile distribution gap. It's really a geographic sort of distribution gap. But there's another important gap as well, and that's a gender technology gap. Because in many of these households, you're bringing a technology solution to solve a household problem when you're talking about household energy. and it's women who are in charge of the energy in the household. But if they're not comfortable with the technology, either because they're not aware of it, they've never used it before, no one's ever taken the time to explain how it works, then they're not going to adapt it into their own home, because their home is where they care, and so they don't want to take on the risk. And so closing both the geographic distribution gap and this gender technology gap are central into really resolving and making sure that we do have sustainable energy for all, because it's available, the technology's there, and we just need to make sure it gets into the hands of the people who can most make use of it. And that's really women and girls around the world who, when they bring that technology into their home, can change their lives and the lives of their families and the lives of their communities. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I wanted to start by thanking Osprey and Sally. I remember where I was when I got the call from Osprey, and I think it was maybe even 2.5 years ago. And I remember what I was doing because I stepped aside and we just talked and talked and talked, and I got really excited. And you're just so amazing to take it to where it is today for your continued leadership and your heart. So thank you very much for this and the opportunity to be here. Really amazing. Thank you. And I'm also pleased to be here on the panel with these wonderful women with whom I've worked either directly or tangentially for years and are doing incredible work on shifting our energy paradigm. So Sheila actually asked us to speak to what's the source of the problem, what are the solutions you'd propose, and some specific actions needed to achieve success. And so from my perspective, the source of the problem is an economic system that doesn't represent, that doesn't create human well-being, and an energy system that has evolved within that overarching structure, and a system that prioritizes short-term financial returns over all others, whether it's in energy or whether it's our entire system. And so I want to talk about two transitions that I think are the solution to both of these, the energy transition and our transition to a new economic paradigm. These are big ideas, so Sheila, please cut me off if I go too long. Okay. But I just really want to introduce folks because if we had a better economic paradigm right now, the energy problem would really come along with it. We would see that shift naturally, and so I feel like we need to speak to both shifts that we need to take place. And I wanted to speak briefly a bit more about what I do in the world because I work to show governments and businesses these better ways and how these transitions, the new energy transition, the new economic paradigm, will actually benefit them. And we've talked a lot here against these current corporate structures and current government leadership. And so I'm having advised companies like Google and Virgin and Microsoft and even Duke Energy, who's the biggest polluter in the United States, and I've chosen to work with them. I want to have that honest conversation about how do we work with the current dominant actors in our system? Is that okay? Do we need to be, how do we work with them? How do we bring them along as we make this broader shift? And how do we collaborate with them? And so that's what I'm going to speak to. And I was feeling a little bit awkward about that, given where we are. And Atosa said, well, you're kind of our inside player. So just feel okay about that. You're an inside player working with these guys to help show them and bring them along. So I'm also an American, so I'm speaking from my experience where I work and where I spend my time. So first, on the energy paradigm shift we need to make. Like May Bouvi, I really think we need to be about hope. We need to be showing people this is possible, this is better, it's happening, and we can do this. And the other side is very investing in keeping that fear that it's not possible and maybe making people afraid of enabling our governments to lead and pass new policies. And so we need to be able to show people this is happening. And so after 20 years working in energy and climate, I am very excited about what's happening right now. We've seen renewable energy and energy efficiency technology costs dropping dramatically. In the United States, in the first half of this year, solar was the largest single source of new energy in the country. New business models are enabling our ability to scale up renewable energy and make this energy transition. You have consumer financing tools in the United States through companies that are really fun and exciting, Solar City and Sungevity. They just make it easy for people to make this transition and not have to pay for it themselves. And also crowdfunding by Mosaic. And I really encourage folks to look at Mosaic. They're leveraging our current investment operating environment to enable each of us down to $25 to invest in creating this new energy economy by enabling you to invest in solar projects and scaling that up. So they've so far, only a year and a half into it, They financed about $3 million worth of projects. They have $250 million worth of solar projects in their pipeline, and they have 10,000 people signed up and investing on their platform. So I'm just so excited by some of these shifts that are really enabling us to move forward quickly at scale. Also, our usual traditional utility model is being challenged. We're able to create community empowerment energy programs, community choice energy, which enables people to decide on what kind of energy they want to generate in their communities. They also have municipal energy systems where cities are taking over their electricity systems and developing their own energy systems, going against the utilities and carving out their ownership of their local utilities. We did that where I live in Idaho, is a very conservative place in the United States, and we just had a big win against our local utility on some programs they wanted to roll back because we brought together business leaders with farmers and with grassroots environmental activists as well as city leaders to fight back against a corporation that has consistently won at our state level for whatever rules they wanted and whatever they wanted to put on consumers, they won. So I'm really excited about these new developments, these new innovations, and these shifts. And I love the Green Fleets program that Zipporah was talking about, working with an electric truck company. And really, it's incredible that these technologies are more cost-effective than the gasoline-based technologies. So the electric truck, when Coca-Cola or Pepsi, these big companies, FedEx has a bunch of these, when they buy these trucks, they pay back in 3 to 4 years. And these are investments that they keep for at least 10 years. So the business, these technologies pay for themselves, they make their own case. And so these companies are actually starting to buy these at scale. So we have technology solutions that can help us get there. Okay, so and then sustainable energy for all, I think, is an exciting model bringing together governments and business to collaborate on this shift. Okay, so on global economic paradigm, maybe give me 2 minutes. That's a big question. So obviously, our current system and our GDP and our business balance sheets are all about short-term financial returns. That's what the investors are looking for, and that's what's incentivized. That's what our businesses and our governments are incentivized to create. So we have to make a wholesale shift, moving away from short-termism, internalizing externalities, valuing nature, and using qualitative metrics like countries like Bhutan have pursued through gross national happiness. What they do is they have quantitative metrics that inform the state of their economy and their well-being, but they also have qualitative, and they go out and do surveys of the people in Bhutan to assess, are you connected to community? Do you feel safe and secure? Now the UK is adopting that same model where they're actually doing a mix of quantitative and qualitative systems. You have the Sarkozy Commission that the President of France had pulled together to look at this need to make this shift to a new economic paradigm that was chaired by Joseph Stiglitz. And as a result, many other governments are now looking at how they can make this shift from Costa Rica to France to others to Denmark, and how we can actually change what we value and align our markets accordingly. And I would just say that on the business side, that shift is also starting. So fortunately, you have companies like Puma who have created an environmental profit and loss statement to really assess their environmental impact and the risk that's associated from that. And they realized, and we've talked about commodification of nature and putting a price on things is dangerous, but when they looked at their carbon and water impact and put a price on what they thought the market would likely and should soon price it at, it cut their profit in half. And so when in the current economic system, when a company sees their profit would have been cut in half if these get actually priced as they should be because they're scarce resources, it allows them to make better decisions within that corporation. So I'll just leave it there. Okay. There's a lot more to add to that. There are a lot of companies working on this. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, and now we have Angelina joining us by Skype. Okay.
Hello? Oh.
Hello.
Should I put the video on?
Yes, yes.
Okay, can you pop me back? Let me see. My video?
Yeah.
Okay. I am on. Thank you so much. I was listening to the live stream and I think I was
Thank you.
Am I live now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be among all the women who have so eloquently spoken about energy and about everything that we need to do to move forward and to move into the new energy paradigm. Thank you so much, Osprey, for organizing this event. It is really phenomenal. We should all be talking to each other because energy is one of the most critical components of our lives. It is the most intensive and capital-intensive industry that we deal with. It is at the bottom of a lot of decision-making. It is boundary in how it reaches us, whether through the transmission lines or through pollution. And it affects us all, whether we're in the developed world, in the economies in transition, or in the developing world equally. I grew up in Africa, actually, Africa, Tanzania. We didn't have a lot of energy, and I fell in love with solar power because I saw a solar with water pump. And it was pretty amazing because we had it, and you could also have lighting. And I actually did experience having my hair singed by one of those kerosene lamps, so they're not a lot of fun. And it would be really great to be able to have that for the girls as the Solar Sisters is so well doing. It also affects the economies in transition. I happen to be Bulgarian, and Africa, I went back to Bulgaria and went to Renewable, and realizing that, you know, your government doesn't always tell you the truth, and maybe you should have a choice in where your energy comes from, because I really don't want to have to deal with 50,000 years of contamination, and I don't want my children to have to deal with it, and I really don't want to have issues with birth defects, and I fight every night writing my law school thesis about the increased percentage of thyroid cancer in kids who were close to the Chernobyl accident. We have then had Fukushima, which has also been devastating, and here in California, where I live now, we closed a nuclear power station because it was leaking radiation, and it actually turned out not to be cost effective. Now, having had experience with energy poverty, with energy and economy transition, I decided I must come to the country that is the symbol of all democracy, the United States, and study about energy. So I did end up in New York City. I studied energy law, and I decided to work for the utilities because, as Amy said, you know, you need to work from within. You need to know your enemy in order to be able to understand it and ultimately beat it. So my focus has always been renewable energy and new technologies and strategic directions, and how do we get the players that are working in that field right now, which are the major utilities and the major energy incumbents who make the decisions for us, including the oil companies. We came to the conclusion that, you know what, we've got to have a platform, and that platform has to be a united call for action for all of us, and especially for the women. When I started in this business about 20 years ago, I would go to the boardrooms, I would go into the energy meetings, and guess what? A lot of old white-haired men, but women. Where were the women? Where was the call to being able to represent that sector of society? And we were always told, it's too complicated for you guys. You're not able to understand it. Stay away from it. It is not true. Renewable energy is leading to a great democratization of the grid. This is a movement that we haven't seen in a long time. An industry, which is the energy industry, that has been decayed, and yes, it did take us through the technological revolution, is on the verge of quantum change. There's going to be a big shift because renewable technologies is in fact the disruptive technologies. They take away the very centralized model that we used to dealing with in the energy sector and bring it to the people. It is essentially power to the people, and they mostly empower women and children. We need to make sure we've got the frameworks though. This is not going to happen in a vacuum. Yes, we've had a lot of progress. Yes, technology prices have fallen. Yes, we are able to understand it, and it is now cost effective in many places. But we still need the governments, and we need the support of regulatory frameworks to be able to move forward. And those regulatory frameworks cannot be knee-jerk reactions, which we've seen across the board, where you have a policy that is implemented for 2 or 3 years, and then it changes. Or you have a policy, and you don't have financial stability because somebody pulls away that policy, and the financial folks are left holding the bag. So I like to call it the TLC factor, which is transparency, longevity, and consistency. Those frameworks need to be very transparent. They need to be consistent and long-term, so that you can have investment come in at lower costs and see what we saw happening in Germany, that people technologies such as solar and wind to where they're cost competitive now with the traditional fossil plants. Women and children understand energy, and they understand renewable energy instinctively. When I was at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, we ran a contest with little elementary kids all the way to 12th grade on how you envision the future and what is the future going to hold for you. I tell you, those kids immediately made the connections. They made the connection with the solar panel, the windmill, the sustainable biomass, and they all introduced electric transportation. Transportation is a key component because with those vehicles being increasingly cost effective too, they have a dual function. They not only supply transportation, but they can help the grid. They can stabilize the grid, and they can enable a community to have a microgrid approach where storage provides the balance for the renewable energy. So you take away the excuse of, renewable, the sun doesn't shine 24/7, the wind doesn't blow 24/7. We always need to have large-scale fossil power plants to be able to supply the grid. Not necessarily with advances in storage, with advances in efficiency, with advances in other technologies. We're increasingly seeing utilities and regulators start to understand that this is something that needs to be addressed. Another issue that is very, very important, apart from climate change, our well-being, poverty, education, leapfrogging technology, allowing kids to be able to study on a par with their counterparts in developed countries via the Solar Schools initiatives because they're all connected to the web, allowing doctors across borders to be able to treat women because they now can have a video connection and they can have light and they can assist the nurses that are helping those women in need and reducing child mortality. There's also the connection with water. Fossil energy is the largest single user of sweet water resources after agriculture on this planet. And we're going to have a water shortage soon. So unless we shape up and we start using resources that are endless, that do not have inflation because the fuel for wind and solar is free, we're going to have a very serious water issue because those technologies don't need water as well. And that is something we have to realize in how we are harvesting our energy, in how we are running our transportation, in how we are running our education, in how we are running our households. I would love to see regulations across the board, internationally, that require every single new construction and every single home, especially in the Sun Belt countries where we have energy poverty. But guess what? An abundant source of sun to require solar becomes under component and those houses be standalone and able to supply their own energy needs. That should not be very difficult to do. My sister, Rosemary Booney, who is actually at the conference today, had a very wonderful idea that we can form a network that can be the Women's Energy Climate Action Network called We Can. And that would take women and train girls to be able to install these technologies, because it would be nice to have the loop closed where you not only have the technologies introduced, but you have the technologies installed, maintained, and actually understood by girls. This would empower the girls because it's easy for girls to do it, it's easy for anybody to do it, and it would be a fun thing to do. And one of the reasons I launched Renewables 100 with my partners was because we all as a community, environmentalists, women, mothers, leaders, and even utility folks, because I am a utility folk. I actually am on the board of the California Independent System Operator, and I participate in the decisions that are made to run the grid. We need to be focused on a goal, and that goal cannot 20%, 30%, or 50% and piecemeal it. That goal needs to be a holistic energy, transportation, heating, and cooling, 100% goal. Because we have the technologies, we can reach it. It is the lower cost alternative in terms of value for communities, and it is something that we should as a community unite around and make sure that we bring forward as an initiative. Because unless we do it, I don't know that we're going to have a chance for success. Germany has an official goal of 80% renewables by 2050. We certainly can push it in the electricity sector for a lot more, and we should not be settling for less than 100%, because as women leaders, we can make that happen. And in closing, and I know I've taken a little bit of time, but I won't be there for question and answers, it's technically impossible. I'd like to read a story to you. It's a short story about what is our obligation in the society. And it's entitled, excuse me, Whose Job Is It Anyway? And it's the story of everybody, anybody, nobody, and somebody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got very angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody would not. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. So let's get together and go for 100%. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Angelina. I don't know if you're going to, it might be difficult for you to join us for our discussion, but...
I would love to join you for the discussion, but I don't think it's logistically
great.
possible.
We'll see how it works out. But I'd like to now open the floor and invite any questions that we have for our panel of speakers. Yes? And if you just state your name and organization, and please stand up. And I think we also need to keep in mind that we are actually moving towards, our whole idea is to move towards developing an action agenda. So in posing our questions and in responding, can we think about this and think about actions both at the policy level, but also what we can do in our local communities and implementing.
Okay, my name is Rosemary Ini. I'm from Tanzania, so I represent Women Earth, or Women Environment and Climate Action Network, or Women Energy, whatever you say. My concern, which I totally agree with, is that connection between water, food, and energy. For resilient community building in most of where I work, it's so important to kind of link up these three things together. I have the biggest problem of meeting somebody from the EU, from the British Embassy, who told me that it's so difficult. We cannot just connect these things. Let's do energy, or we do food, or we do water. Bringing all these things together, it's a big problem. So I just want to ask you on the panel, is that a big problem? Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we go ahead? Yes. Yeah, I think the answer is no. I mean, it's an ecosystem, and we see that energy, one of the phrases that we've been using is that sustainable energy is essential to sustainable development in all its different forms. And the answer is that energy permeates all of these different aspects of development, whether it's water, from a water pumping for irrigation for agriculture, whether it's agricultural food processing, and we've been talking about the food chain, and so much food does go to waste, partly because people don't have the energy to be able to process it, to dry it, to add value to it, so that to refrigerate it. So yes, energy is connected to everything else. Is it a challenge? Sure. But hey, that's what we're all about. And I think part of what we can feed in is these solutions, and how as women we can be addressing these complex challenges, because they are solvable. And we do have the solutions, and at times we do have the policy, but we need to be able to align what Amy was talking about with the investment, with the actions at the community level that Catherine was talking about, and help make those shifts.
Thank you.
And can I add to that?
Oh, yes.
I would just add, I think we should make the problem a little bigger, because I think it's not just energy, food, and water, but it is also economic development, and also population growth, because I think all of those things are affected. And if you look at energy, if it had been one of the Millennium Development Goals, it would be the only one that's going in the wrong direction. Because all of the other ones, there's been tremendous movement and improvement towards the goals. But energy, we're actually going to be more people without access to energy in 2050 than we are today. And that's because the population growth is outstripping the access to energy growth. And so when you put in all of those problems together, it's either that you're getting one really big problem, or what I think is really happening is you're finally getting to the solution, which is that it is an ecosystem that we need to address that involves something as fundamental as how do we treat our planet, but also how do we treat ourselves, and how do we as women have control over our own lives and our own reproductive systems, and how we spend our time and how we spend our labor. So I think women are particularly and uniquely positioned to make the change and have the key for solving this one great big huge ecosystem problem.
Okay, I'll invite another question. Yes?
Add two things very quickly.
Could I just, okay, I'll take a question and then you can
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Nolene Mbulivo from Dawn, and I just wanted to thank you for the panel. It's been very enlightening for me. And I wanted to ask, one of the things that we've been tracking the Rio Plus 20 process and now into the Sustainable Development Goals process and the post-2015 Development Agenda. And there are ongoing discussions about technology transfer and about what are the ways that the structures need to change as well in terms of technology from north to south. How does south-south cooperation happen? Because for me it's also, if we take a political economy approach, we have to ask where are the technologies coming from? You've spoken very much about some of the large companies. So I have a kind of two-part comment question, and if you could talk to both of them, it would be wonderful. So one is around this issue of technology transfer, but the other is about the title of the panel, which is about just transitions. So for me, that's also about, can you speak a little more about how green the green technologies are? Is it a case where there are technologies that still have kinks in them, and more than kinks, where we have e-waste problems to do with solar issues as well? Because one of the things that we're dealing with in the Pacific right now is about deep sea mining and about the reasons for deep sea mining. So as people are moving from fossil fuel based developments, they're moving towards, they're still looking for rare earths, for minerals that go into these new technologies. So I just wondered if we could have a conversation around that as well. The second part, which is linked to that, is what we found in the past is that the technologies where we're not so sure how safe they are, they often, generally, they will first be trialed in the places that are those who have the least money, that have the least access to justice. Sometimes they are trialed in the South, in the global South. So that's another part of the question. It's not directed just to you, it's about the conversation around political economies and how we're thinking as we move toward new technologies, being sure that we're thinking through questions of justice and human rights. Are we moving problems from place to place? Thank you.
Thank you.
Those are great questions. Just quickly on the water piece first, but those are massive questions, so thank you, but thank you. On the water piece, I just want to say, thinking about it in two ways, the provision of water at the project level and the opportunity to connect energy, food, and water together, and that renewable energy, of course, provides the opportunity for people to have access to water, and therefore agriculture, therefore be more self-sustaining, more empowered, more enabled, because they have more time on their hands, obviously. So there's the project level connection of energy, food, and water, and how renewable energy is empowering on food and water. And then secondly, looking at it from a global planning perspective, the connection, when you look at energy being one of the largest, if not the largest users of water in many societies, certainly in California it is, and in many parts of the United States. And there's the Renewable Energy Project in Southern California. It's a new solar thermal project, and it's 90% built, and it's going to supply energy to 140,000 homes, and it's going to use the same amount of water as one hole of one golf course. So it's the transition away from coal and nuclear and how that ties into the connection to water. So being able to speak to it from a broader planning perspective as well as to the project perspective. Okay, the bigger questions. I think that the critical piece of this is we've seen business and governments increasingly talking to each other, whether it's in the venue of Sustainable Energy for All or others, but there is much less civil society engagement and conversation about how do we ensure that the values that we all want are proliferating the conversations at the government and business level, who are usually the ones who have more power to set the rules. And so being able to ensure that as we move forward that we have that civil society at the table empowered and fully equal in that conversation, if not more so, to enable the values that we're building in the new economic paradigm, in our new energy systems, are about what the people want and not the just the powers want. And so I think it's for all of us to think through how do we enable this at the local level, the national level, and the global conversations. And I think new technologies can help with this a lot as we think about how do we have a global conversation on energy, on the future of energy. How do we enable a better dialogue where the public's involved, even if they're not all in the room, but how do we have a broader societal conversation and use technology to do that? I think that the shift to clean energy can be and should be inherently empowering because it can be distributed. The ownership models can be locally based, and that we need to connect perhaps the investment dollars outside countries with the investment dollars in local banks, with the local entrepreneurs. And so you keep the ownership there. They don't come in and buy these companies and then take them out, but they actually invest in projects in these countries, in entrepreneurs in these countries. And you can pair global funds, whether it's global development funds or global investment bank funds, with the local financial institutions, with those local entrepreneurs. So those models are models that Rashenda and others have been pursuing at the clean energy level and seeing how we can take that beyond just clean energy.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question online, so before we take another question from the floor, I'm going to read this out, and I would ask Angelina if you could answer. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, so this is a question from Victoria from Vision Hub. She says, with so many of our own unique experiences and struggles, what are some of the ways that we can act in solidarity to show support for the international women's community?
Well, I think as we talk and as we are becoming more organized and more aware of what needs to happen, we need to have a united front, a united platform. I mean, call it Solitariat Unite, or call it Women Unite, or We Can. And it should be around the 100% renewable energy goal. Now, we had some questions asked before. You know, are some technologies greener than others? Is green all equal? No, certainly they're not. But you know, sometimes the perfect is the enemy of the good. Is the windmill better than a coal power plant? Yes, if you make sure that you don't kill birds and you have all of the mechanisms that are necessary in order to enable migration. On the other hand, more birds get killed by running into power lines and into tall glass buildings. So why is the debate centering about renewable energy? We need to step back and stop making excuses for ourselves and looking for pittance and saying, oh, we're a niche player, we're a small player. We're not. We're powerful, we're strong. We can go to the 100%, including the transportation sector. It is a justice issue because as population grows, the only technologies that can meet the growing energy demand is distributed and it's renewable. You can get a village powered by renewable solar, and solar is made out of silicon if you're using the silicon, which is the most abundant material on the face of this earth after oxygen, and it can be recycled. And it can be manufactured by women, it can be manufactured and installed locally, and it can be maintained locally with women taking the leadership role. We need to educate the policymakers, where the countries and the decision makers making energy decisions are focused on making a distributed and a much more decentralized system possible with microgrids and with storage that are locally controlled, because that's what's driving development. As part of our work on the Renewables 100, we see now that almost, 50 million people have their own destiny with goals to 100% renewable energy. And you know what? People are tired of just talking to the politicians. They're taking control of their own destinies. They're working on the municipal levels. They're working on the local levels. They're working with the leadership where they're saying, you know what? We're buying back the grid and we will control our own grid. Thank you very much, large utility, go away. As Amy pointed out, and it's happening all over Europe and Africa as well. Those are technologies that can be incorporated. And you know what? If a solar system was financed like a utility is financed, we're asking people in the developing countries, which is the poorest people on the face of this earth, if they want to have clean power and clean light, essentially to pay for a solar system up front that provides them electricity for 20 years. My goodness, if I had to pay 20 years of upfront electricity, I would never be able to afford it. We should have microfinancing, and those people should be able to get access to small loans that they can pay off on a monthly basis to ensure clean energy for their children, for small enterprise, for education, for healthcare, and for bringing them up from poverty. Because unless we all get on the road of 100% renewable energy as a goal, and as an ambition, and as a human right, we are not going to be able to solve the climate issue, and there's always going to be winners and losers in the short term, but in the long term, all of us are going to lose.
Okay. Thank you very much, Angelina. I'm going to take a question from this side of the room, and okay, Sasha. We'll start with, okay, and then Sasha. Okay, 5 minutes. Okay. So we have only 5 minutes, so please, if we can keep our questions and our answers short.
Hi, my name's Natalie Isaacs. I'm the founder of 1 Million Women, and I'm from Australia. And it was actually a comment and a quick question for Amy. We focus at 1 Million Women very much on energy consumption. In Australia, we waste 13 to 20% of the electricity that we pay for. Just north of where our office is, we have the largest export centre in the world. But there is good news, because there is a rooftop revolution going on. And a few years ago, only a couple of years ago, there was a couple of thousand houses with solar panels. And today there is over a million households, which is really quite extraordinary. And what I wanted to ask Amy is, are you seeing that same rooftop revolution, and where do you see that going? Because I find that incredibly exciting in Australia. Where do you see that going?
Sure. Very quickly, absolutely. In the United States, it's happening, particularly in California and Hawaii and places, the Northeast, where it's more cost effective because they have higher electricity rates. But they're national companies. They're actually global companies. Sungevity, the one I mentioned earlier, is actually founded by an Australian. Is there, and they're very large in Australia, but they're based in the U.S., but they're very large in Australia. I met the CEO, founded it at the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992. I was U.S. Youth at Rio, and he was the Australian. We were running around, and so it's so great. He's founded this for-profit company, growing globally and enabling people to adopt solar because they finance it for you. And so immediately, you don't pay money up front. You're immediately saving on your electricity bill each month, and so it's a no-brainer to switch to solar with these business models. Solar City is the other one I'd quickly mention, founded by Elon Musk, who did the Tesla, who is the billionaire who founded PayPal. So he's now putting his billions into Solar City, a competitor for Sungevity. And they're not worried about each other. They know this market is massive globally in the United States and beyond. So absolutely it's happening. It's a huge revolution.
Okay. Okay, and just to we have only got 5. I think I've run out of time, haven't I? Sorry. So we're going to be meeting each other, and we'll continue the conversation. I'm sorry. I do have to, having come from a developing country, just to conclude, we've talked a lot about solar and electricity and different type of technologies, but I think it's really important to come back to, I think, the crux of the matter and the question that we're asked: what are we going to do to support women communities all around the world? A priority energy issues for women, particularly in developing countries, is for cooking. And for cooking, we have to look at investing in non-polluting, low-cost biomass technology. So I think that's really a priority area that we're going to discuss. And I know the Sustainable Energy for All initiative, but also UN Foundation and other organizations are working through the Global Alliance on Clean Cooking Stoves to try and move forward this agenda, which is underinvested and under-resourced, but also forgotten, but is putting it back on the priority agenda of the energy, of energy for development. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you.